Hey, you know what time it is? Woo-hoo! Get into it! Yes! We're back! We're back, happy people. And we're back with Storytime with Chris. How you doing? It is a beautiful day in the life, to say the least. Yes, I hope everybody is having an awesome day on my favorite day of the week. Yes, indeedy. We are finally here, y'all. We're on the final book of the Prydain Chronicles. We have been pushing it through these last few months. And I want to thank you for your patience and your kindness. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, maximum relax and chillaxing time. Meantime, scheme time, in between time, study time, break time, anytime, happy time. CP time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, adventure, and many, many more in between. So, last time we were here, Taran was making his way back to Caer Dallben, having found the Mirror of Lunette, having grown and matured as a person, and accepting the ultimate truth that it doesn't matter who your parents are. What matters is who you are and who you make yourself to be. Because the truth of the matter is that we are the masters of our fate. Nobody can tell us or make us do things that we don't necessarily want to do. Even in the situations where we don't feel as though we have a choice. There is always choice. And as a wise person did say, like, oh, because you didn't come to make the choice, you've already made it. You've come to understand why you made the choice. And that is on period. Period! Okay? Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started in the final epic conclusion. Oh wow, I'm actually going to read this. It's a dedication from the author. It says, for the boys who might have been Taran, and the girls who will always be Eilonwy. That's awesome. Much love and respect to Lloyd Alexander. Which actually we're going to be reading. This right here. This is my favorite book of all time on my top 5 list. Top 5. This story is what we're going to read next. The Remarkable Journey of Prince Jen. So, it's a Chinese folklore story that's loosely based on some historical events, but no. We're going to read this. Trust me, it's going to be epic. It really is. Once we get into it, it is everything that I would want in a story, especially the way it's structured. We'll talk about that another time. But, of course, I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background. Now, let's go ahead and begin. Chapter 1. Homecomings. Under a chill, gray sky, 2 riders jogged, across the turf. Taran, the taller horseman, set his face against the wind and leaned forward in the saddle, his eyes on the distant hills. At his belt hung a sword, and from his shoulder a silver-bound battle-horn. His companion Gurgi, shaggier than the pony he rode, pulled his weathered cloak around him, rubbed his frost-nipped ears, and began groaning so wretchedly that Taran had last reined up the stallion. Make sure. There we go. No, Gurgi cried. Faithful Gurgi will keep on. He follows kindly master. Oh, yes, as he has always done. Never mind his shakings and achings. Never mind the droopings of his poor tender head. Taran smiled, seeing that Gurgi, despite his bold words, was eyeing a sheltering grove of ash trees. There is time to spare, he answered. I long to be home, but not at the cost of that poor tender head of yours. We camp here and go no farther until morning. They tethered their mounts and built a small fire in a ring of stones. Gurgi curled up and was snoring almost before he had finished swallowing his food. Though as weary as his companion, Taran set about mending the harness leathers. Suddenly he stopped and jumped to his feet. Overhead, a winged shape plunged swiftly toward him. "Look!" Tarn cried as Gurgi, still heavy with sleep, sat up and blinked. "It's Kaa! Dolben must have sent him to find us." The crow beat his wings, clacked his beak, and began squawking loudly even before he landed on Tarn's outstretched wrist.
"Ilanwe!"
Kaa croaked at the top of his voice.
"Ilanwe! Princess! Home!"
Tarn's weariness fell from him like a cloak. Gurgi, wide awake and shouting joyfully, scurried to unloose the steeds. Tarn leapt astride Melalas and spun the gray stallion about and galloped from the grove, with Kaa perched on his shoulder and Gurgi and the pony pounding at his heels. Day and night they rode, hardly halting for a mouthful of food or a moment of sleep, urging all speed and strength from their mounts and from themselves, ever southward down from the mountain valley and across great Avrin, until on a bright morning the fields of Caradalban lay before them once again. From the instant Tarn set foot across the threshold, such a commotion filled the cottage that he scarcely knew which way to turn. Kaa had immediately began jabbering and flapping his wings. Cole, whose great bald crown and broad face shone with delight, was clapping Tarn on the back, while Gurgi shouted in glee and leapt up and down in a cloud of shedding hair. Even the ancient enchanter Dolben, who seldom let anything disturb his meditations, hobbled out of his chamber to observe the welcomings. In the midst of it all, Tarn could hardly glimpse Ilanwe, though he heard the voice of the princess very clearly above the din.
"Tarn of Caradolban," she cried as he strove to draw near her. "I've been waiting to see you for days. After all the time I've been away learning to be a young lady, as if I weren't one before I left. When I'm home at last, you're not even here."
In another moment he was at her side. The slender princess still wore at her throat the crescent moon of silver, and on her finger the ring crafted by the fair folk. But now a band of gold circled her brow, and the richness of her apparel made Tarn suddenly aware of his travel-stained cloak and muddy boots.
"And if you think in a castle is pleasant,"
Ilanwe went on without a pause for breath,
"I can tell you it isn't. It's weary and dreary. They've made me sleep in beds with goose-feather pillows, enough to stifle you. I'm sure the geese needed them more than I did. The feathers, that is, not the pillows. And servitors to bring you exactly what you don't want to eat, and washing your hair whether it needs it or not, and sewing and weaving and curtsying and all such I don't even want to think about. I've not drawn a sword for I don't know how long."
Ilanwe stopped abruptly and looked curiously at Tarn.
"That's odd," she said. "There's something different about you. It's not your hair, though it does look as if you've cropped it yourself with your eyes shut. It's, well, I can't say. I mean, unless you told someone they've never guessed you were an assistant beekeeper."
Tarn laughed fondly at Ilanwe's puzzled frown. "Alas, it's been long since I tended Hedwyn. Indeed, when we journeyed among the folk of the free commots, Gurgi and I toiled at nearly everything but pig-keeping. This cloak I wove at the loom of Duvok, the weaver-woman. This sword, Heved, the smith, taught me the forging of it. And this," he said with a trace of sadness, drawing an earthen bowl from his jacket, "such as it is, I made it at the wheel of Anlaw Clayshaper." He put the bowl in her hands. "If it pleases you, it is yours."
"It's lovely,"
answered Ilanwe.
"Yes, I shall treasure it. But that's what I mean, too. I'm not saying you aren't a good assistant pig-keeper, because I'm sure you're the best in Prydain, but there's something more—"
"You speak truth, princess," put in Cole. "He left us a pig-keeper and comes back looking as if he could do all he set his hand to, whatever." Tarn shook his head. "I learned I was neither swordsmith nor weaver. Excuse me. Nor, alas, a shaper of clay. Gurgi and I were already homeward bound when Kaa found us, and here shall we stay."
"I'm glad of that," replied Ilanwe. "All anyone knew about you is that you were wandering everywhere where. Dalban told me you were seeking your parents, and you met someone you thought was your father, but wasn't. Or was it the other way around? I didn't altogether understand it."
"There is little to understand," Tarn said. "What I sought, I found, though it was not what I had hoped." "No, it was not," murmured Dolben, who had been watching Tarn closely. "You found more than you sought, and gained perhaps more than you know."
"I still don't see why you wanted to leave Caradolban,"
Ilanwe began. Tarn had no chance to reply, for now his hand was seized and shaken vigorously. Hello, hello, cried a young man with pale blue eyes and straw-colored hair. His handsomely embroidered cloak looked as though it had been water-soaked, then wrung out to dry. His boot lacings, broken in several places, had been retied in large strangling knots. Hello, hello. Prince Rune! Taran had almost failed to recognize him. Rune had grown taller and leaner, though his grin was as broad as it had ever been. King Rune, actually, the young man answered, since my father died last summer. That's one of the reasons why Princess Ilanwe is here now. My mother wanted her to keep her with us on Mona to finish her education. And you know my mother. She'd never have left off with it, even though Dalman had said word Ilanwe was to come home. And so, he proudly added, I finally put my foot down. I ordered a ship fitted out, and off we sailed from Mona Haven. Amazing what a king can do when he sets his mind to it. We've brought someone else along, too. Rune continued, gesturing toward the fireside, where Taran for the first time noticed a pudgy little man sitting with a cookpot between his knees. The stranger licked his fingers and wrinkled a flabby nose at Taran. He made no attempt to arise, but only nodded curtly while the straggly fringe of hair around his bulbous head stirred like weeds under water. Taran stared, not believing what he saw. The little man drew himself up and sniffed with a mixture of haughtiness and wounded feelings.
One should have no trouble remembering a giant, he said testily.
Remember you? Replied Taran. How could I not? The cave of Mona? Last time I saw you, though you were bigger, to say the least, but it is you, nevertheless. It is indeed Glue.
When I was a giant, Glue said, few would have forgotten me so quickly. I'm fortunate that things worked out as they did. Now in the cavern... You started him off again, Ilanwe whispered to Taran. He'll go on like that until you're fairly whittled, about the glorious days when he used to be a giant. He'll only stop talking to eat, and only stop eating to talk. I can understand his eating since he lived on nothing but mushrooms for so long, but he must have been wretched as a giant, and you think he'd want to forget it.
I knew Dalman said calm with a potion to shrink Glue back to size, Taran answered. Of what happened to him since then, I've had no word.
That's what happened to him, said Ilanwe. As soon as he got free of the cavern, he made his way to Rune's castle. No one had the heart to turn him away because he bored us all to tears with those endless, pointless tales of his. We took him in with us when we sailed, thinking he'd be grateful to Dalman and wanted to thank him properly. Not a bit of it. We almost had to twist his ears to get him aboard. Now that he's here, I wish we'd left him where he was.
But 3 of our companions are missing, Taran said, glancing around the cottage. Good old Dolly, and Fluter Flam, and I had hoped Prince Gwydion might have come to welcome Ilanwe. Dolly sends his best wishes, said Cole, but we shall have to do without his company. Our dwarf friend is harder to root out of the fairfolk realm than a stump out of a field. He'll not budge. As for Fluter Flam, nothing can keep him and his harp from any merrymaking whatever. He should have been here long since. Prince Gwydion as well, Dalman added. He and I have matters to discuss, though you young people may doubt it. Some of them are even weightier than the homecomings of a princess and an assistant pigkeeper.
Well, I shall put this on again when Fluter and Prince Gwydion arrive, said Ilanwe, taking the gold circlet from her brow, just so they can see how it looks. But I won't wear it in a moment longer. It's rubbed a blister, and it makes my head ache, like someone squeezing your neck, only higher up.
Ah, princess, Dalman said with a furrowed smile, a crown is more discomfort than adornment. If you have learned that, you have already learned much.
Learning, Ilanwe declared. I've been to my ears in learning. It doesn't show, so it's hard to believe it's there. Wait, that's not quite true either. Here, I've learned this.
From her cloak she drew a large square of folded cloth and almost shyly handed it to Taran.
I embroidered it for you. It's not finished yet, but I wanted you to have it even so, though I admit it's not as handsome as the things you've made.
Taran spread out the fabric. As broad as his outstretched arms, the somewhat strangled, threaded, embroidered showed a white, blue-eyed pig against a field of green.
It's meant to be Henwin,
Ilanwe explained as Rune and Gergi pressed forward to study the handiwork more closely.
At first I tried to embroider you into it too, Eilonwy said to Tard, because you're so fond of him and because I was thinking of you. But you came out looking like sticks with a bird's nest on top, not yourself at all, so I had to start over with Hen alone. You'll just have to make believe you're standing beside her. A little to the left, otherwise I never got this much done, and I did work the summer on it.
If I was in your thoughts then, Tard said, your work gladdens me all the more, no matter that Hen's eyes are really brown. Eilonwy looked at him in sudden dismay.
You don't like it?
I do, in all truth, Tard assured her. Brown or blue makes no difference. It will be useful.
Useful? Cried Eilonwy. Useful's not the point. It's a keepsake, not a horse's blanket. Tard of Caradol, but you don't understand anything at all.
At least, Tard replied with a good-natured grin, I know the color of Henwood's eyes. Eilonwy tossed her red gold hair and put her chin in the air.
Humph,
she said.
And very likely forgotten the color of mine.
Not so, Princess, Tard answered quietly. Nor have I forgotten when you gave me this, he added, taking up the battle horn. Its powers were greater than any of us knew. They are gone now, but I treasure it still because it came from your hands. You ask why I sought to know my parentage, Tard went on. Because I hoped it would prove noble and give me the right to ask what I dared not ask before. My hope was mistaken. Yet even without it, Tard hesitated, searching for the most fitting words before he could speak again. The cottage door burst open and Tard cried out in alarm. At the threshold stood Fluter Flam. The bard's face was ashen, his ragged yellow hair clung to his forehead. On his shoulder he bore the limp body of a man. Tard, with Rune behind him, sprang to help. Gurgi and Eilonwy followed as they lowered the still figure to the ground. Glue, his pudgy cheeks quivering, stared speechless. At the first instant, Tard had nearly staggered at the shock. Now his hands worked quickly, almost of themselves, to unclasp the cloak and loosen the torn jacket. Before him, on the hard-packed earth, lay Prince Gwydion, Prince of Dawn. Blood crusted the warrior's wolf-gray hair and stained his weathered face. His lips were drawn back, his teeth set in battle rage. Gwydion's cloak muffled one arm as though at the last he had sought to defend himself with this alone. "Lord Gwydion is slain!" Eilonwy cried. "He lives, though barely," Tard said. "Fetch medicines," he ordered Gurgi. "The healing herbs from my saddlebags." He stopped short and turned to Dalbin. "Forgive me. It is not for me to command under my master's roof, but the herbs are of great power. Adion, son of Taliesin, gave them to me long ago. They are yours if you wish them." "I know their nature, and have none that will serve better," Dalbin answered. "Nor should you fear to command under any roof, since you have learned to command yourself. I trust your skill as I see you trust it. Do as you see fit." Cole was already hurrying from the scullery with water in a basin. Dalbin, who had knelt at Gwydion's side, rose and turned to the bard. "Whose evil deed is this?" The old enchanter spoke hardly above a whisper, yet his voice rang through the cottage and his eyes blazed in anger. "Whose hand dared strike him?" "The huntsman of Anuvan," replied Fluter. "2 lives they almost claimed." "How did you fare?" he urgently asked Taran. "How did you outride them so quickly?" Be thankful it went no worse for you." Taran, puzzled, glanced up at the distraught bard. "Your words have no meaning, Fluter." "Meaning?" answered the bard. "They mean what they say. Gwydion would have traded his life for yours when the huntsman set upon you not an hour ago." "Set upon me?" Taran's perplexity grew. "How can that be? Gurgi and I saw no huntsman, and we've been at Caerdalman this hour past." "Great Baylor, the Flam sees what he sees!" cried Fluter. "A fever is working in you," Taran said. "You, too, may be wounded more grievously than you know. Rest easy. We shall give you all the help we can." He turned again to Gwydion, opened the packet of herbs which Gurgi had brought, and set them to steep in the basin. Dalbin's face was clouded. "Let the bard speak," he said. "There is more in his words that troubles me." "Lord Gwydion and I rode together from the northern lands," Fluter began. "We'd crossed Avrin and were well on our way here. A little distant ahead of us in a clearing." Bard paused and looked directly at Taran. "I saw you with my own eyes. You were hard-pressed. You shouted to us for help and waved us onward. Gwydion outdistanced me, Fluter went on. You've already galloped beyond the clearing. Gwydion rode after you like the wind. Lion carried me swiftly, but by the time I caught up, there was no sign of you at all. Yet huntsmen aplenty. They had no sign to drag Gwydion from his saddle. They would have paid with their own lives had they stood against me, cried Fluter. But they fled when I rode up. Gwydion was close to death, and I dared not leave him. Fluter bowed his head. His hurt was beyond my skill to treat. I could do no more than bring him here as you see him. You saved his life, my friend, Tard said, and lost what Gwydion would have... and lost what Gwydion would have given his life to keep, cried the bard. The huntsmen failed to slay him, but a greater evil has befallen him. They stripped him of his sword, blade, and scabbard. Tard caught his breath. Concerned only for his companion's wounds, he had not seen that Dernwyn, the black sword, hung no longer at Gwydion's side. Terror filled him. Dernwyn, the enchanted blade, the flaming weapon of ancient power, was in the huntsmen's hands. They would bear it to their master, to Aurorn, Deathlord, in the dark realm of Anuvin. Fluter sank to the ground and put his hand in his head. In my own wits are lost, since you tell me it is not yourself who called out to us. What you saw I cannot judge, Tard said. Gwydion's life is our first care. We will talk of these things when your memory is clear. The harper's memory is clear enough. A black-robed woman moved from the dark corner where she had been silently listening and stepped slowly into the midst of the company. Her long, unbound hair glittered like pale silver. The deadly beauty of her face had not altogether vanished, though now it seemed shadowy, worn away, lingering as a dream, only half recalled. Ill fortune mars our meeting, assistant pick-keeper, Akren said, but welcome none-the-less. What then do you still fear me? She added, seeing Tard's uneasy glance. She smiled. Her teeth were sharp. Neither has Alonwe, daughter of Angharad, forgotten my powers, though it was she who destroyed them at the castle of Lear. Yet since I have dwelt here, have I not served Dolben as well as any of you? Akren strode to the outstretched form of Gwydion. Tard saw a look almost of pity in her cold eyes. Lord Gwydion will live, she said, but he may find life a crueler fate than death. She bent and with her fingertips lightly touched the warrior's brow, and drew her hand away and faced the bard. Your eyes did not play you false, Harper, Akren said. You saw what was meant for you to see. A pick-keeper? Why not? For thus he chose to appear. Only one wields such power. Aurorn himself, Lord of Anuvin, land of the dead. And that is where we will end for today. And there's Dernwyn right here. Because if you remember from the first book, the Book of Three, when we were introduced to the Horned King, Tard actually... The sword itself is sentient. The word sentient means it has a mind of its own. It's a living creature. The sword itself. It's magical. It's enchanted. So Tard actually... The sword cannot be unsheathed by someone it feels is not worthy of its power. Someone who isn't ready to handle that type of power. It's a very incredible magic sword. So Tard did force it out of there to try to defend himself from the Horned King, and ended up killing the Horned King because of the vast amount of flame and magic that was producing out of it. But Tard was burned because of that. And so now the fact that somebody has taken it forcibly from Gwydion, who by all means and traits is the rightful owner of such a terrifyingly incredible sword, it begs the question, what's about to happen? And Akren seems to know what happened and what Fluter saw and what caused Gwydion to get jumped and ambushed. So we're going to find out next time we meet. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.